One of the most important things in your life is your family. That's true of you, that's true of me, that's true of everyone. Families are often called the building blocks of our society, and they're just tremendously important. It's for this reason that the General Assembly of the United Nations has proclaimed 1994 as the International Year of the Family. They realize that we must raise the world's awareness of the plight of families, the many strains that family life is undergoing and suffering, and the need for all of us and all of our institutions to work together to enhance families and family life. The churches and religion in general share that concern even more deeply and are themselves major contributors to better family life and family living.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Welcome once again to Austin Faith Dialogue. We're going to be visiting with you this morning on something of just crucial importance to us as individuals and to our society and to our culture, namely families, family life, and the situations in which many American and families across this world find themselves. Visiting with me this morning is Mary Boone, the family life consultant for the Roman Catholic Diocese of Austin, and Patricia Stankus from the Pastoral Center of the same diocese. And I'm John McCarthy, Bishop of the Diocese of Austin. I'm very happy that the two of you would take time to visit with us this morning and talk to us about something that I know you're working very, very hard on at the present time in both your respective roles with the Catholic Diocese. And you have counterparts in all of the other faith communities of Central Texas and across the country, because you just have to open the newspaper and look at the statistics on the social forces that are impacting family life. Some of them are wonderful. I mentioned in the opening about the importance of families. They're important negatively as well as positively, in the sense that if a child gets off to a bad start in an unloving or an insensitive situation, that child will be partially crippled or maybe severely damaged for the rest of their life. So I want to, without even getting a report from you on all the work that you're doing, I want to thank you for your generous concern about family living. Mary, what would you say that family life looks like in the United States today? Take 30 seconds and tell me about 200 million people.
Well, Bishop, I think there's a great deal of diversity in family life today, more so than we've seen in previous generations. And I think that's a fact that we need to be very sensitive to. We have families who are traditional families, you know, first marriage, several children, and those are now the minority. In this decade, it is expected that second marriage and blended families will surpass in numbers the traditional family. And so I think we as leaders need to educate ourselves to the characteristics and the diversity so that we can be sensitive.
Well, being sensitive is one thing, but I'm coming out of a tradition that says that new situation is less than ideal. It reflects an awful lot of pain in our society.
That is true. That is true. You know, and the ideal is still that there be a first marriage that survives. You know, we do uphold that value of permanence and commitment, and as do the people, you know, that we minister with. But due to life circumstances, due to the wounding that people experience that you alluded to, for some that is just not possible. And the societal forces in our world today sort of operate against, you know, that value. And we need to support people in making choices and affirm them when they have difficult choices to make and help them do the healing that they need to do.
I certainly agree with that. Patricia, in your work with the diocese, you cover a wide range of different programs. You're involved with an office that's trying to make the diocese more sensitive and more effective in at least 8 or 10 different areas of ministry inside the life of the church. That gives you the opportunity to work with Mary Boone, to work with the youth office, to work with a number of other different agencies and commissions in the diocese that directly or indirectly concerned about family living. Do you share Mary's view that there's a dramatic change that's been going on in our society?
Yes, Bishop, there is. There's so much. Even the vocabulary that we use to talk about families is so different from what I grew up with. We're
Yeah,
talking,
she said blended families. I thought
Yes.
she was talking about a piece of kitchen equipment. How do you use that word? Just
A blended
second
family,
marriage?
a second marriage,
Children from two different
children from two
spouses?
different spouses.
Forgive the interruption.
Oh, but there's just so much change going on, and the needs that are there within each family is different. What we see is uniqueness, but also that the society itself has changed. Economically, people can't survive on one salary as they did 30 years ago. Most families need to have two people working.
Forgive me, and I'm really in a good mood this morning, but need is a relative term. We have set a standard of living for ourselves that creates that need. Actually, we could survive, most of our families could survive at a lower level if they were willing to live with a simpler lifestyle. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think that's a mixed bag, because sometimes it is important that we simplify. I think it's very important that we do simplify. But when you look at the cost of education, when you look at the cost of hospitalization, when you look at the things that are out there that really...
I really agree with you there, Pat. You could drive an older car or not air condition the whole house at one time, but when it comes to the cost of giving your children a better chance in the next generation, nobody wants to cut costs there, and I really understand that.
Well, and we need to mention here, too, the single-parent family, you know, where there is not a second person to provide income for the family. And the fact that most children growing up in single-parent families, particularly where a woman is the breadwinner, are living in poverty. I think the estimate is about 25% of our children are living in poverty conditions.
Out of the total population, but I believe that it's higher than that. There are exceptions, but single parent almost is synonymous with poverty because the person who finds themselves in those straits often has a minimal education and minimal earning possibilities and has the additional cost of having to pay someone to take care of their child while they themselves are out working. So it's well, you both spoke rather generically. Let me sort of crowd you a little bit. Let's talk about the last 30 years. How much change, be a little more specific, how much change has occurred in the last 30, since the mid-1960s?
Yes, well, I am a child of the 50s. And growing up in Corpus Christi, Texas, I had only one friend whose parent was in a second marriage. All of my friends, it was a very homogeneous, stable environment. And I did not experience personally the trauma, you know, or the brokenness that goes along with real disruption in family life. My children have most of their friends coming from homes where there have been divorce and second marriage. Many of my current friends are divorced and remarried, and I think this is a dramatic change. And these people are trying. You know, they are living the best that they can.
And a little more practical, too, there's a diversity of roles. When I was growing up, the men knew what they were going to do, and the women knew what they were going to do. And now you see men in the grocery store doing the shopping and having a toddler with them, and you see women going out in business suits and going to work. There's a whole diversity of roles that have changed. And I think it's good that men are willing to do some of the things that traditionally were assigned to women.
I certainly agree with that. The problem is we don't provide people in our culture with courses on how to adjust to that. We've had monumental tension and conflict. I've had situations where a man would not know until maybe 3 or 4 days before the marriage that his wife had no intention of taking his name in the marriage.
Yes.
She had a professional background. She was proud of her name, and she wasn't going to take it. The trauma, maybe when that's more common, if that becomes more common, that wouldn't produce as much pain and suffering. But there's just this mixing up of roles, the changing of roles into a more equitable and just set of relationships and responsibilities, I think is a good thing. But we have come out in a very haphazard way that's caused an enormous amount of pain. Would you agree to that?
Oh, yes, yes. And I think sometimes the roles are changed in order to do one-upmanship rather than to look for that justice that you talked about. The other change I think that we see is when growing up, we always knew where moms were. Moms were in the home. And now, because of economics, because of one-parent homes, people are working. And the kids come home to to houses where parents aren't present because they're out there working. I think that's another change that we see in the families.
I recognize the accuracy of what you're saying, both of you. And I recognize the need to be sensitive, to try and understand the social forces that are at work. But if I were to run back over what the two of you have said over the last few minutes and made a list of them, from my perspective, it's not all that encouraging. Roles have changed, confusion, second marriages, children from two families blended into a third family. We've always had a little of that, but the mathematics of what we're facing today is just astronomical. I have to ask a question. I started off by saying, you know, the family is the building block of society. If what you are saying is accurate, and I think it is, and if it were to continue to expand, you'd have a question of, will the family survive as we know it? Will it be here in another 50 years? Let me drop that on you.
I think it will. I think it will because...
Thanks be to God.
Because within each family unit, no matter how it might be shaped, there is the capacity for change. And if within the family themselves that they will work and reach out one to another, change will happen in the family so that positive growth comes. And that's a ripple effect that goes out into society. And so often we've pointed out, I think, some of the I hate even to label it as negative, but some of the changes that have happened, and we forget to mention those families, no matter what their composition, that are functioning very well and are making contributions to society and are producing people who do good things.
I certainly recognize that, but I wouldn't apologize for the use of the word negative. A lot of these factors are very, very negative and very destructive, and the bottom line is pain. The amount of pain that's occurring in the life, as a nation, we're becoming more conscious of the fact that the children in this country are, a high percent of the children in this country are suffering tremendously. Not just the poverty, but I didn't review the statistics before we started, but I think very close to half of the children under 4 or 5 years of age are being cared for by somebody outside the immediate family. I think people in that field of child care are doing wonderful things, but I don't think you can substitute for the love of a mother, the embrace of her arms, her constant concern. I know that we're being orchestrated by economic forces that no single individual, and social forces that no single individual feels that they can control. But I don't think we ought to be complacent about the degree of change. Some of the things, some of it's the freedom of women to develop themselves, to capitalize on their talents. I'm for that. But I hope we can, through people like yourselves, continue to struggle to find a medium ground where we can maintain as many of the traditional families as is possible, while at the same time trying to help single mothers and people who are in second families and so on.
Yeah,
Could you tell me about, pardon me, I'm sorry.
Excuse me. Well, I just want to say, you know, I believe most people hold that value, you know, of intact traditional family, and for whatever reason, they're not able to live that out in their lives, and we need to support them in that effort and in maintaining that value. You know, and societal change doesn't happen on a global scale so much as it happens one-to-one, you know, in dialogue. And if we as church leadership can support people in negotiating those rough waters and maintaining the value while living with the realities that they live with, you know, then I think family life will survive. Some of the parameters will change, you know, but the basic value will remain and will be held intact. Most people very much want to maintain that.
Mary, I don't completely agree with that. In the ideal, yes. But I deal as a parish priest with far too many situations where a young couple marries, there's a beautiful wedding, she comes down the aisle in a long white dress, there are 8 attendants, 10 attendants, a great reception, and 3 months later, there's a very serious misunderstanding and they split up. It's not really a serious misunderstanding. It's just their first. We have a low tolerance in our society, and I can't start talking like an old man now about young people need a good dose of toughness that's required to handle misunderstanding and handle personal pain inside their relationship, and know that their love for each other is so strong and so real that they can continue to build a good life together. But we have an awful lot of people who break and run the first time there's trouble.
That's right, because they haven't had the role modeling, perhaps they haven't had the education, perhaps they haven't had the opportunity to grow, you know, and to have those strengths develop, you know, that it takes to withstand, you know, the stormy times and the disillusioning times, and to know that in most cases it's a passage, you know, that they can get through. And that's where I think our responsibility comes in. And I am very, very happy to see a shift in direction within our Catholic Church, our Roman Catholic Church, to offer more support to families and to become more educated ourselves about family systems, family life stage development, about how the family really functions, so that we can build on that and help people develop those strengths.
That support is offered not just to families in the traditional sense, but there's a well-developed program all over the United States, and I think it's going all over the world now. The Roman Catholic churches, and I know other churches probably been doing it longer than we have, providing definite programs of support for men and women who've gone through the trauma of divorce.
That's right.
The beginning experience.
That's right.
Could you tell me a little about, I know in outline form what it does. How does that function?
Well, the beginning experience is a weekend retreat that helps an individual who has lost a spouse, either due to divorce or death, put closure on that former relationship in order to heal healthily and facilitate that grieving process so that they can go forward with their lives. There is a companion program, beginning experience, for children or for teenagers that's active in some parts of the country.
And is it active here in Central Texas?
Not at the present moment. That is something that we might give some attention to.
Got your work cut out for you.
You know, there's another program that is new here in Central Texas called Retrouvailles, which is French for rediscovery. And it also is a weekend retreat program with 12 follow-up sessions that facilitate communication between a couple when they have come upon rough times. And it's a real hands-on, excellent program to facilitate that communication and the healing that then comes about.
Retrouvailles, would you say that again?
Retrouvailles. R-E-T-R-O-V-A.
And literally, what does that mean?
It means rediscovery. It is French.
Rediscovery of your spouse.
That's
in other
right.
words, it's
And
an
of
effort to save an existing marriage.
Exactly.
I would hope that that would expand tremendously in our society. I really feel sad about the times that I have been around marriages that were in the process of breaking up, and felt strongly that with a little counseling, with a little calmness, with some maturity, that the whole thing could be put back in place. But we don't have enough of that.
No, I agree, and I wish more people would avail themselves of these opportunities. We cannot live alone, you know, and we need supports. And these are vehicles for giving people the support systems that they need.
We're going to take a break right now, but I'd like to come back and talk to the two of you about what we've touched enough on the problems. Now let's talk about what the church and other institutions in our society can do to help. Stay with us at Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll be back in a moment. Pardon me?
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
Welcome once again to Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm visiting this morning with Pat Stankus and Mary Boone, both of the Diocese of Austin, and we're talking about a crucially important subject, the family life in America, our own family life and the culture and the circumstances in which it struggles. We were talking about a whole sea of problems there, Mary. You were both a little more optimistic, I think, than I am, but that's because I'm so much older, a little worried. Let's talk about the positive side. You mentioned, Pat, that the millions of wonderful families that are tight and
Yes.
together, doing well. Why is the family so resilient in the face of all of these difficulties and problems?
I think there are several things that stand out in family life that we can point as their strengths. And one of them is that commitment that people have to stay together and to work through a relationship. The other thing that they do is that they'll take the time to be present to one another. It's so important. So often you'll see families or people talking about, I need to take this time, and they're scheduling time for their families, being with them, the capacity to develop that sense of humor and to see that the humor in the situation and not always to be threatened by it. And one of the, I think, the big keys in any type of family is the ability to recognize that in working through a relationship, you're going to let go of the manipulation and control, and that's always a hard thing to do. But if you're going to be successful in a relationship, at some point there is that breakthrough experience where you begin working together rather than trying to control one another. And I think a marriage to survive or a family to survive, that's a key element. And
Mary, I want to ask you the same question, but if I could piggyback that for just a moment. To do that effectively requires maturity. That the spouse, the husband or the wife, has to understand themselves and understand the person that they are preparing to marry or have married. Now, I know that many churches now, certainly the Roman Catholic Church does, offers a program of trying to sensitize people to that, you know, the need to let people be themselves, to not try and control, to not manipulate. You can't, of course, learn that in a three-day weekend, but at least you can become sensitive to certain psychological aspects. And I think one of the most important things is if we can help young couples to talk about not how beautiful she is, not how handsome he is, not how well they dance, but what are his weaknesses? What is there in her that's less than ideal that I must live with for the next 50 or 60 years? Do you think that that's doable to help people mature and to face the reality of their approaching marriage more realistically?
I think it's doable, but when you're that much in love, you really don't see any of the negative things. I think it comes with lived experience as you work through a marriage or any type of relationship. Each time that you go at a problem, and it really, the things that happen in a family, it's how people handle them that are more important than the actual event. I'm not putting down the events, but how we struggle with that, how our response to it. And it's in those situations that I think you come to terms with that type of control. And there's one thing that we really haven't mentioned, and I just want to bring up, that within every person and within every marriage, God is present. And as we grow in our faith, we also learn that we don't have control, and we have to give response and to trust that God is with us. I think that's a model that we can use in our family relationships too.
That's a beautiful thought. I'd like to see it expand, and if everybody could think that way, it'd be a great source of strength, not just in our churches, but in our country. Mary, can I come back to you and ask you about the resilience of family life, pushing aside the very many problems that we face, but what's there at the core that enables us somehow to keep going?
Hope. I think hope. Yeah, you know, I think everyone has hope, that kernel of hope within them, even when it seems very discouraging. You know, I talked to a young mother yesterday who was just really fatigued, you know, with caring for young children, and she felt like it was all closing in upon her, but as we talked, she identified strengths that she has, elements of her life that she can be indeed grateful for, and it began to generate once again hope and the attitude that I believe I can do this. See, and that's inner strength, inner peace, God's grace. You know, there are a lot of terms that people use for it, but I think there is great reason to be hopeful, and I think resiliency comes out of that hope that yes, it is worth pulling together and trying again. And I want to mention honesty also. And when Pat was speaking of the control and the manipulation, I think sometimes it helps couples and family members to just find the courage, you know, to be honest about their thoughts and their feelings. So much difficulty comes about because we try to protect one another and protect ourselves. And
well, hope comes out of, for most of us at least, out of our rootedness in faith and religion.
yes.
And in the limited amount of time that we have left, I want you to just touch base on a few things, going back and forth about some of the things the Catholic Church, the Baptist Church, the Methodist Church, any kind of religious community can help strengthen the families we already have and help the new families that are being formed to be strengthened.
I think one of the things that all churches have are some type of groups that exist already in the parishes or in the church communities, whether it be a Bible study or whether it's a men's group or any kind of a group. They get together and they talk, they share their experiences, and they find out that their experience is not unique. Everybody is having that same thing. They have the same struggles. And again, that's where the hope comes in. People walk together in their struggle to live life and to grow in faith. And I think that community aspect of whatever is existing works well, and that gives people the courage to continue.
Great.
Yes, and in previous generations, the extended family, excuse me, was more available to persons for that very purpose. And now the extended families oftentimes live at such a great distance that we need to reinvent or recreate, you know, in our church communities, that sense.
Do you think anybody's doing that successfully?
Oh, I do.
You
I
do?
do. I think it's happening a great deal in our
Could you expand on
parishes.
that for just a moment?
Well, I have been a part of it. You know, I have belonged to groups in my own Catholic parish as well as a Methodist parish that was very supportive and really provided a forum for people to bounce off their ideas, their thoughts, their feelings, get affirmation, get validation, get encouragement, get suggestions, you know, and then feel like they
It sounds
can
like you're saying that
carry
to
on.
both of you that the churches are, in some limited extent or maybe some profoundly effective degree, able to substitute for the extended family, which is no longer present. Well, I want to thank you very much. I thank you for your presence here this morning, and I thank you for the work that you do for families. And I want to thank you for visiting with us this morning as we consider the issue of family life in America and our own individual families. It's our greatest gift, and if it's mishandled, it can be a real burden to us. But we hope that you'll be working in your own personal life to make your family and the families that you know a strong religious presence in your own lives. God bless each and every one of you, and thanks for visiting with Austin Faith Dialogue.